people don't realize that 50% of the antibiotic use in the US actually goes to animals. I mean, that's really incredible if you think about it. We're all trying to limit the amount of antibiotics we use so that when we really need them, they will work. But if we're consistently eating animal meat that has antibiotics in it, that's building up resistance in our bodies. So we're already seeing that, people having more resistance, which is a huge problem. I mean, there's like 100,000 deaths annually of people who, that's directly related to antibiotics not working.
Welcome to Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, talking wellness and weight loss for real life. We're here to clear up the myths, misinformation, bad science, and marketing to teach you how to eat and how to cheat. Are you ready? I'm having salad with a side of fries. Hey there, welcome back to another episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck, as you know, always here with you. And a special welcome to our newer listeners. We're so glad you're here. And I'm absolutely thrilled for today's conversation because this is something I've wanted to discuss with you all since I think I started the podcast, and I finally have the guest to really help us do it justice. So let me fill you in. She's earned her plant-based nutrition certification and food and sustainability certification from the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies at UCornell. After being diagnosed with high cholesterol in her late 20s, she discovered the China study and started exploring the science of nutrition after she ate a whole food, plant-based, no oil for just 7 days. Her cholesterol dropped 50 points. That was the beginning of her family's journey from the standard American diet to the whole food, plant-based, no oil lifestyle. After all of this, it led her to writing her book, For Fork's Sake. So you get why we vibe, right? She's also a licensed practitioner of massage and the pain neutralization technique, plus a certified yoga and Pilates instructor and a spiritual director. She received her BA in geography from the University of Washington and has been an adjunct professor in nutrition and wellness. She belongs to the University of Washington Alumni Association, the T. Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies, Whole Communities Program, and Eat for the Earth, as well as Plant Strong and McDougall communities. Happily married with 2 grown children, she lives in California, where she is usually trail running, rock climbing, cycling, and bike packing with her husband. So without further ado, I give you Rachael Brown.
Thank you so much, Jen. That's an amazing introduction. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And I'm like, this is finally happening because I said
Yay.
this to you before we started recording. It feels like it was ages ago.
Yeah. Time flies, huh?
For real. So I always like to start with our guest story, but so I don't interrupt too many times, let's first tell our members what they're getting and then we'll get into it.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. So members, your recipe this week is for vegetarian breakfast casserole. People always ask me for breakfast ideas, and I love this one. It's a great combination of protein and fiber, plus a single batch makes 10 servings. So whether you're having company or you want to make something and have it last all week, maybe for you and others in your house, this one is for you. So if you want this recipe delivered right to your inbox, be sure you're a member. You'll go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries. For $10 a month, you get weekly recipes, a monthly article or tool, extra discounts from me and our partners, plus access to live Q&A sessions. It is a total deal. When you take advantage of the full offerings, you save far more than that $10 cost. I say it every time. This is a no-brainer way to show yourself that your health is a priority. Plus, being a member supports this podcast and this community so we can continue bringing you new episodes and experts all the time. Coming up on episode 200, help us keep it going. So remember, you're going to go to glow.fm/salad with a side of fries, or just click the link in the show notes because that's way easier than remembering the whole thing. Once you're there, you click support now, enter your email and payment info, click subscribe, and you're all set. You'll get this week's recipe for the vegetarian breakfast casserole.
Sounds delicious. It does.
I know. All right, Rachael. So we heard a bit of your story in introducing you. And like so many of us in this space, we get here often from our own life experience, but also you went from studying geography to nutrition and food sustainability. So talk us through it.
Yeah, it's been a circuitous route for sure. But, I've always had an interest in places and people. And that was kind of studying the geography in college. And then, ended up getting married, having kids, and teaching yoga and Pilates, geography of the body at that point it was. Going back to school for massage, doing that for 10 years. Within that, using that pain neutralization technique, which is really helping people get out of chronic pain. So that was fascinating work, neurological work, just helping people use their own bodies to turn off pain. And I did that up until COVID. And then when I couldn't see clients, I went back, and we'd been eating plant-based for 10 years at that point, but decided to get certified in it and see if I could help others on this journey, because it can be a bumpy one. And so, yeah, decided I still couldn't see anybody, during COVID. And so decided to write a book just in capturing our story for people. But, really, maybe like a lot of your listeners, I dealt with high cholesterol my whole life, and I was always decently healthy. I was an athlete always, but I had high cholesterol in my early 20s, and it was hereditary. My dad had always been on cholesterol medication, and I didn't want to have to take medication. And so I would go to my doctor, and he would say, cut back on cheese and eggs. And so I'd do that, and it would get, lower into the okay range. And then it just always creep back up. So that was kind of always going on. And I was always frustrated with that. And then about 13 years ago, I had a 5-year-old nephew who was diagnosed with cancer, and his mom was in nursing school at the time. And they had a small hobby farm. They were growing all their own meat. They had chickens. They had a huge garden. She taught me how to pull mozzarella the year before. But she had a professor who asked her if she had looked at the role of nutrition in cancer. And that professor suggested she read the China study and watch Forks Over Knives. And she did that, and they changed their diet overnight. And she said, you should really take a look at this. And I read the China study and initially was just mad, mainly mad because nobody had told me this information. I felt like I'd been looking for this information, and to find out that, our health was really in our hands, and we really have an effect 3 times a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, with how we affect our health, was really life-changing. So that set us out on this adventure, and we dove all in. My grandfather had Alzheimer's and died of pancreatic cancer. My uncle died of pancreatic cancer. My dad's in the early stages of Alzheimer's. So we had a lot of family history reasons to try and mitigate, the damage done to our health by genes. And we now know that 80 to 90% of what happens to us is not the genes, but the lifestyle. So finding out that food was a huge piece of that, and that we could control that, was really life-changing. So that's why I wrote the book. It's really a why. Why is this important for us and for the planet? And then a how. We all know really, right, what we should do. We know we should eat more vegetables. We know we shouldn't eat fried foods, but it's the how. How do you actually do that? How do you make this a sustainable thing, not a diet, but a lifestyle? That's what I really unpack in my book.
Yeah, awesome. And we're going to dig into all of the why and the how and all that stuff in a second. But I would be remiss if I didn't say, how is your nephew? What's the rest of that story?
Thank you. Yeah, I always forget to mention, he is happy and healthy. He just turned 18.
Great news.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, exactly. They're doing well and have continued this too.
Love it. And then also for people who maybe are not familiar, brief overview of the China study, so everybody's on the same page with us.
Sure. So T. Colin Campbell wrote the seminal work on really what he found. I would say the main or key takeaway for me was the role of animal protein in our bodies. And he did this huge study in China. It was the biggest study. I think it's the biggest still comprehensive study.
I think so too.
Yeah, a number of people wise. So he was looking at cancer rates across China. Why do people get certain cancers in certain places? And basically found out that there are, certain regions, if there's toxins or whatever, that cause certain cancers. But primarily, the more animal protein you eat, the higher rates of cancer you get. And he was able to replicate in studies using rats and all of that. If you add protein to a diet, animal protein, not plant protein, you can add animal protein, and there's a certain point where you can turn on cancer growth. And if you take that animal protein away, you can stop that cancer growth. And you can replicate that with plant protein. You can times it by 10, and there's never cancer growth from plant protein. So it really was about how animal protein affects our bodies and what it does to cell growth, repair, yeah, all of that.
Okay, awesome. So I want to start, I think, with understanding, food systems and farming practices. And then there's also sort of the US and the global piece. So I guess let's start with the US, right? How does our food system work in the US? And then I'll stop talking. Like, there's so much information out about farming practices. And then especially during COVID, we heard about issues with these food plants and all these things. So I feel like there's a lot of information, but give us like the real lay of the land.
Yeah, there is so much. I mean, we could talk for days on this subject for sure, but really to bring it down, I would say the biggest issue, I mean, at the forefront of all our minds is climate change, right? We hear this all the time, and it has to do with carbon dioxide. And animal agriculture is responsible for, depending on studies, the most recent study would put it at 87%, but somewhere between 50 and 87% of the greenhouse gases come from animal agriculture. So you're looking at concentrated animal feed operations, what it takes to grow the feed for these animals, monocropping, just huge swaths of land being used for corn or soy or alfalfa. So it's a problem because more land is used to grow feed for animals than is for humans. So this can get us into trouble. I mean, we have hungry humans in the world. So statistics like if the grain fed to livestock in the US alone were fed to people, 840 million additional people could be fed. I mean, that's really mind blowing, So when you stop to think that raising animal protein takes 100 times more water than plant protein, it takes 11 times more fossil fuels and 5 times more land, you just look at the amount of energy we're putting into growing feed for animals when we could be feeding ourselves. So climate change obviously is affecting us all these days in different ways. I live in California where even though we've had crazy amounts of rain this year, atmospheric river after atmospheric river, we're still technically in a drought. And, a gallon of milk requires 1,950 gallons of water to produce. So when you look at those numbers and the statistics of what it takes to make animal products for us to consume, it really starts to not make sense if we're looking at taking care of the earth and feeding ourselves. So yeah, there's a lot of confusion and not a lot of readily available information out there about what it takes to actually grow our food. And like you touched on it, there's from everything from the land to the water to the soil to the air, all these things are affected in really profound ways. And humans are being affected hugely as well. And not just from, what we're eating or our water being affected or the air we breathe, but also human rights. I mean, these are people that are having to slaughter animals. These are people who are dealing with the chemicals when they spray pesticides. So yeah, at every angle, we're dealing with this issue.
Yeah. So, I mean, I want to break it down maybe even a little bit further, because I think one of the big things also with monocropping is what it depletes from the soil, and that we're continuously depleting the same nutrients from that soil, which then has implications for the quality of our food.
For sure. Yeah, we're losing topsoil at huge rates just because of the way they farm huge monocropped plots of land, the way they till. I mean, you can see from space the dust and then the fire when they have to burn so that only one crop will be growing there. There won't be any other biodiverse crops around. They want to just have the land arable for that one crop. When you can see from space these things happening, that's a big impact. And then, that dead soil, it needs to have nutrients put back onto it, right? So then you're adding things, nitrogen, which then 40 to 70% of that runs off into waterways, which then runs into oceans and creates dead zones, So, and then, the ocean, when it's warming, that leads to acidification. So now we have corals dying, mollusks, their shells are disintegrating. I mean, things that are not natural. These are because of our farming practices that don't have to be this way. They really are in an effort to grow massive amounts of feed for animals. The other thing is subsidies, that our government subsidizes a lot of these commodities. So, there's a reason there's corn syrup or high fructose corn syrup or corn oil in almost every packaged product. It's just like dairy. I mean, the government pays for this, so it needs to put it into products. So it's not that it's healthy for us or good for us. It's just that we have a surplus of it and we need to use it.
So many things are going through my head. So I'm like, there's a piece of all of this that because of the factory farms, right, then it's adding the antibiotic piece to what's happening, right? So talk a little bit about like the antibiotics and then the implications of that for humans who eat the animals treated with the antibiotics.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think people don't realize that 50% of the antibiotic use in the US actually goes to animals. I mean, that's really incredible if you think about it. We're all trying to limit the amount of antibiotics we use so that when we really need them, they will work. But if we're consistently eating animal meat that has antibiotics in it, that's building up resistance in our bodies. So we're already seeing that, people having more resistance, which is a huge problem. I mean, there's like 100,000 deaths annually of people who, that's directly related to antibiotics not working. So this is a huge issue. And it's given to these animals because they're in crowded spaces. They get sick because they're living in such ways that's not healthy for them or the environment or for us. So, if we were able to not have tons of animals crammed in tiny amounts of space with no fresh air, with dirty water, all of that, then we wouldn't have the need for antibiotics being used on these animals. But that being said, people will often say, well, I only eat grass-fed beef, and like, well, that's amazing. But grass-fed beef accounts for 1% of the meat eaten in the United States. So that is not a lot. And actually, if you're doing this for environmental reasons, grass-fed beef live a lot longer. So they're producing a lot more methane. They live a lot longer because they're just eating grass. They're not eating grain being fed to them like on a big animal feed operation. So they're actually, when they're eating grass, they're belching and farting more, that's where we get the methane. So now you have companies that are coming up with like masks for cows to wear to try and capture some of the methane. I mean, some really crazy sci-fi kind of stuff when we really could just eat less beef and, that would take care of it.
Yeah, but it's so interesting you brought that up because I was going to ask you, like, not to play devil's advocate, but to ask the question I think a lot of people are thinking, is it the same situation? Like, if we're eating the grass-fed beef or the non-factory farmed animals to some degree, is that solving or making a dent in the issue? And the other side of that question, I think, is also going back to what you were saying before about how many, acres of crop is grown to just feed the factory farm animals. Is the quality of what those are growing what humans would eat anyway? Like, isn't to some degree part of the issue the quality?
Yeah. I mean, I would say people often will say, well, I hunt, so I get elk or deer and I eat that. And I'm like, that's amazing. But not every person in the US has the ability, right, to go hunt. So,
desire.
If you can, right, exactly, right. So basically for me, it comes back to, but we don't have to, right? We eat this way because we have a taste for meat, because we've been told that this is the best thing for us, when in fact, those things both can be changed. I mean, it's not true that it's the best thing for us. Back to the China study, we know now that animal protein is actually detrimental to us. It increases our growth hormone, blood estrogen, free radicals, cancer mutations. I mean, all kinds of things. So we can eat plant protein and have all the benefits of the protein that we're getting from animals without all the side effects. Plus, we can be saving the earth. So yeah, if you can find beef, let's say, that's grown in a safe way, there's, regenerative farming practices. I would argue you don't. And a lot of science would argue that you don't need the animals to do regenerative practices, which, that's the thing. We could solve this whole issue with climate change if we just take all that land that we're using for cattle and let it rewild. We don't even necessarily have to plant trees, but let vegetation grow again so it can draw down the carbon. We can still drive our cars, fly our airplanes, all those things. And we would still be taking care of the issue if we just got rid of all these billions and billions of animals that we just are using to eat. So yeah, I guess I would argue that we don't need the meat. If you want the meat, that's a different thing. If you can find it from a clean source, somewhere that's not putting antibiotics into their meat. But arguably, there's not a lot of that out there. But this is where, as consumers, it's demand that creates, the need. So we are voting every day with breakfast, lunch, and dinner as to what we want on our plates. So, yes, it's going to be more expensive to purchase organic beef, but in the long run, that's going to be saving us all.
Totally. I'm like equal parts frustrated, right? When you think about the government subsidies and the whole situation, and that there's this big behemoth of a system that has such a snowball happening, right?
Yes.
And the other side of it, though, too, I feel like is what you're saying. Like, there's also a piece of it that's very empowering because it is actually our daily choices that can impact this big behemoth.
It's so true. And that's the part that gives me hope, because yes, it can be so depressing. So many of these statistics are just like mind blowing and horrible. But then when you pause and go, oh, but with the next meal that I eat, I can affect change here. That's huge. That's really huge.
Awesome. Could not agree more. So we're going to shift into all of that of like everything we can do after a quick message from our partner for this episode. Big thanks to Lumiere de Vie Skincare for supporting Salad with a Side of Fries. Lumiere de Vie Skincare was founded by Amber Reidinger McLaughlin in response to her own experience of mere marginal results from countless costly creams. She realized the revitalization of her youthful skin could only occur if she developed products herself. Working closely with beauty scientists and exploring the most advanced ingredients derived from the earth and sea, Amber created Lumiere de Vie, the next generation of skincare. The extensive line of luxury skincare products is designed to address all skin types and concerns, with the highest quality natural ingredients and powerful formulas that help heal, soothe, moisturize, and protect. Lumiere de Vie acts as first aid for your skin. The result is rejuvenated, luminous, beautiful-looking skin. So this time of year, I think we're spending more time outside, right? We want to be smart about the sun and take care of our largest organ, our skin. So Lumiere de Vie skincare is a big part of my own skincare routine, morning and night. If you're ready to upgrade, maybe part of your spring cleaning, you realize that everything in your medicine cabinet or everything that you use is old, maybe expired. I see you. It's okay. But let's upgrade. Maybe you're using the same thing you've been using for decades. So it's time. And they've made it really easy. The skincare value kit gives you the cleanser, toner, and moisturizer for $125. The men's kit is $90. So it's a tremendous value for the ingredients in these products. And because you're a Salad with a Side of Fries listener, you get 10% off your order plus free shipping. So text the word SKIN, S-K-I-N, to 844-947-4846. You'll get the link and coupon code right to your phone. Again, simply text the word SKIN to 844-947-4846 to try Lumiere de Vie Skincare, get 10% off and free shipping. This is a toll-free number. Standard text and data rates may apply. Okay, Rachel. So our first step in many of things is knowing why we're doing something. And for a lot of people, I think they can feel like it's just me in my home. Like, how is this going to impact this, like I said before, this big behemoth, like the machine of the food industry? So talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. It does take a bit to step back a little bit and go, well, where do I fit in this whole grand scheme of things, right? So there's all kinds of things we can do, from trying to grow some of our own food, kind of like we talked about, if you're a hunter and you live somewhere where you can hunt your own food, you can grow your own food, you can do all those kinds of things, shopping at a local farmer's market, participating in a CSA, but remembering that this huge food system is really a system. There are big players that are running this system, and whether we like it or not, we are a part of it whenever we purchase something with our dollars. So how to think about it, I think we have to stay positive and think about what we can do. When we stop to think that there are really 5 to 7 main conglomerates that are running the food system in the world, there's 2 main chicken companies running all the chicken in the US. When you really think about it, it's kind of a wild system, but it is affecting the food that people around the world eat. So whether that's US Farm Bill helping with food aid. I mean, these things have been used in political ways. They've really had a dampening effect on other nations trying to grow their own food to eat their own food. So the more we can step back and look at what we can do, I think the more helpful it is.
So thinking about some of the things that we can do, right? The first thing that, if I recall correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, the first thing your family did was focus on eliminating the animal protein. Is that where everybody starts? Is that, what are some of the options for how to sort of dig into this?
Yeah, I would say for most people, first I ask people to look at themselves and go, okay, how do I operate? Because how I usually do things is how I will usually go forward in doing things. So for some people are really black and white and love a good challenge. And once they learn new information, they're ready to implement it immediately. So, hooray for those people. It can make life easy in some ways. And for those people, I outline like the total kitchen clean out and how to go about doing this. Other people are slow starters, and it's easier to start with taking meat out of one meal a day, let's say for a week, or, having a meatless Monday or whatever it is, cutting out dairy, so it helps to know yourself to decide how you're going to go about this. But yes, I would say animal products are the first thing for your health and for the health of the planet that are the easiest to get rid of. And by easy, I don't mean, you're going to lose your taste for ice cream overnight or bacon, but you're going to save money because when you go to the grocery store, the most expensive things in your carts are meat, dairy, ice cream, cheese, all these animal products. You're going to save time because you don't have to go to different stores to get different animal products. You don't have to prepare all this meat or fish or chicken or eggs or whatever it is. And you're also going to notice things like you're going to have less sinus issues. If you have a lot of dairy, maybe you're constipated, digestion issues, all kinds of things. Excess weight will be shed. Your blood pressure can drop. Your cholesterol will go down. All these other side effects. So yeah, I encourage people to start with the animal products. Removing those as quickly as you can, you will notice the biggest benefits as soon as possible.
Give us a couple tips to help make that happen so that is like, I can imagine somebody going, I know that you think that's easy, but to me, that sounds incredibly daunting.
Totally. And yes, I say it's simple, but not easy, right? So simple, don't eat anything with a mother or a face, but not always easy. So, the first thing we did when we transitioned, our kids were 6 and 8. So it was a big ask, but the easiest thing I found is to sit down with those you live with, or if it's just you, make your list of your favorite foods. So these were things like cheeseburgers, enchiladas, pizza, macaroni and cheese, because we had small kids, like these were the favorite dinners. And from there, just find a plant-based equivalent of that. And so now it's so easy. 13 years ago, it wasn't as easy to Google a whole food plant-based no oil recipe for lasagna. But now you do that and there will be thousands, I guarantee you. So, pick a new mac and cheese recipe that uses cashews instead of dairy, or uses oats if you don't want to use nuts, and play with that for a while. So maybe pick 2 or 3 meals that are your favorites and find some replacements. And by replacements, I don't mean like the processed, chorizo from the store.
I was just going to say, yeah.
Yes, because those, while they may be helping to save the planet in, less animal footprint, all of that, they're still a packaged processed food product, and our body doesn't deal with that the same. So, and a lot of them have a ton of added oils, which are detrimental to our health. So, you can make amazing burgers from black beans, any kind of bean, really. You can make meatloaf from lentils, you can make carrot dogs instead of hot dogs. I mean, there's all these things you can make from real whole plant foods that are going to be really inexpensive. And you can probably make with what you already have at home. So just learning, it's going to take a little bit of learning, look up some new recipes, find some new favorites, and just swap out 2 or 3 dinners, with these new substitutions. And the amazing thing is that our taste buds change literally around every 2 weeks. So if you give yourself 10 days to 2 weeks of doing this, you will already start to notice that your taste buds are changing. Like those red peppers taste incredibly sweet, that peach is almost too sweet now, whereas before it wouldn't even tasted really that sweet if you were eating Oreos, right? So your body will be your friend in this.
Yeah, and I love that you talked about, with kids, because no matter who's in your household, it doesn't have to be a deal breaker. I think it goes back, about the why. Like, why is this important? I think we touched on the why of the planet and the why of our health. In your work and in your clients and in your book, like, do you hear about people, like, is there a why if those aren't resonating with somebody? Are there other reasons out there that people tend to cling to?
Sure. Yeah. Usually when I'm working with people, it's because either sadly they've had some big health scare and all of a sudden they're ready to do, something drastic or something that they knew they should have done a long time ago or something they tried before but didn't succeed at. So they're looking for a fresh start. So sadly, health scares are a big one. Also, weight loss. That's a lot of times people come to this because they've tried everything. They're tired of jumping on, every bandwagon, every diet bandwagon. They've done keto, they did paleo, they did, they miss carbs. I love this way of eating because you can eat carbs and starches all day long. In fact, you're encouraged to. It's just the types of carbs, right? We're not eating refined white bread. We're eating whole wheat bread. We're eating brown rice. We're eating oats. We're eating all kinds of things. And sometimes people come because weight gain. They want to gain weight, actually, but they don't want to do it eating animal protein. So they're trying to figure out how to do it. So yeah, there's all sorts of reasons that people come to this. And I really do think that, especially for people who are frustrated with or just, it's so noisy out there, right? Like they're frustrated with all the noise, all the different information they hear, what's the next superfood? Oh my gosh, should I be eating that or whatever? Just to simplify things, to help people get it down to a really simple, actionable way of living, and it's less expensive. It saves you time. You don't need to live near a Whole Foods. You can eat this way if you have only a dollar store nearby. You can buy a bag of lentils and a bag of rice and you're good to go. So it's really a really simple way of living, and people find that it just frees them up in so many other areas of their life. So it's so gratifying to work with people who, for whatever their reason, who find their way to this way of eating.
Yeah. And I appreciate that you talked about sort of, the economic component of it, because, I feel like a lot of times we have this idea that we're going to need all these things and it's so expensive or whatever, but one of the things you said to me also last time we spoke is that people aren't attracted to this because we have this perception of like peasant food.
Yes.
Yes. Which also sometimes reminds me of like, it's how you cook it, right? It's what you're choosing. And then that's the other piece. And a distinction that I want to make sure everybody's hearing is that you're talking about whole foods, not every packaged thing that just tells us it's not an animal.
Yeah. And I think that can be really confusing for people these days. While it's amazing to have all these plant-based products on the market now, it is really confusing if you're new to this to see that, oh, well, Reese's is plant-based, so that must be good for me. You really have to kind of learn a few things in the beginning to go, okay, don't be duped by what's on the front of a label. Learn to read the labels and know what all these things are you're eating. But yes, we are, for the most part, talking whole food, plant-based, so real foods that you would recognize, that your grandmother would recognize, not things that come out of a package, so you don't have to do all your buying at a bulk bin, but there are plenty of breads and other things that you can eat that come from packages. You can find oil-free crackers, that kind of stuff. But for the most part, we're wanting to base our diet, what we eat, on these whole plant-based foods. And those things look like real foods. So, yeah.
Awesome. All right. I think to wrap this up, your book, For Fork's Sake, is a tremendous resource. What are also, for people who want to learn more or dig into some of this food industry and system and sustainability stuff, what are some of the resources? Because I also think, like we're saying, there's so much information. How do we know who to trust? So like, who do we trust? Where do we find those? What are some of your recommendations?
Yeah, so good. I would say Dr. John McDougall He has written The Starch Solution among, maybe 11 or 12 other books. He's got a great website. His McDougall Foundation talks about the connection between diet and the planet. T. Colin Campbell's works, all of his works, I would say, the China Study being one of them. He's got a few other books that are also wonderful. And his idea of, it's all linked together. This is all a whole system. So none of this can be parsed out and just dealt with separately. So kind of tying all these things together. He's wonderful for that. Glenn Mertzer's Food is Climate book is probably the biggest recommendation I'm giving to people these days. It's super short. It's like 59 pages, then additional recipes at the end. But it is an incredible book. And he links all of this with Al Gore, Bill Gates, Paul Hawken. He has this whole response to what's really out there on climate change. So Food is Climate by Glenn Mercer is a great one.
Love it. Amazing. Well, thank you. I'm so excited to keep digging further and for people to really understand the connection between what's happening in their kitchen and everything else.
Yes, me too.
Awesome. All right. I think it's time for our rapid fire off-topic questions. Are you ready?
I am.
Perfect. What's the best thing you've done for your health this week? What's the naughtiest thing you've done related to your health this week?
Ooh, the best thing I think was we batch cooked a ton of soup on Sunday. I've got the recipe for the soup we use in the book, In for Fork's Sake, and we did a huge pot of that. And I've been eating at least one bowl, maybe up to 4 a day of that soup. So that was the best. The worst, I would say, I don't typically take over-the-counter medications, but I have this crazy sinus cold. So I've taken both Sudafed and NyQuil this week. So that would be my worst.
All right. If you weren't a plant-based and food sustainability expert, what would you do?
Ooh, that is a good question. I love body work of all type. Teaching yoga and Pilates, working with massage with clients was great. I also love outdoor activities. So I was an adventure camp director at one point, and I think I would go back to probably mountain guiding or hiking, being a hiking guide in the Swiss Alps. I would do that tomorrow.
Oh, that went from like, I don't know, to like, I'm in. Okay.
Yeah. I was just remembering a trip we took a few years ago. I'm like, ooh, that's what I want to do.
Yeah. All right. Your favorite book on any topic other than your area of expertise or a fiction book?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say the China Study, but that changes it. So I think Factfulness by Hans Rosling. I don't know if you've read that book, but that is a fascinating book. I would highly recommend that to everybody. It's not fiction. It's true, but gives you a whole new lens on the world as we see it.
Awesome. It kind of reminds me, just based on the title, of The Death of Expertise.
I haven't read that.
Yeah. I'm terrible at the rapid fire thing. I always respond. Okay. Okay. If you could cure one ailment, disease, or sickness, what would it be?
Oh, so many good ones to choose from. But I would say Alzheimer's, since my dad's in the early stages of it. We've got the gene for it, which is, a huge part of why we eat this way. So that would be what I would choose.
Yeah. If you were a superhero, what would be your superpower?
I would love to fly.
For sure. What's your biggest pet peeve?
I have a few, but I would say being late is probably my biggest.
I get it. All right, last one. In your opinion, what's the next frontier in wellness?
I might be biased, but I think eating plants, really, I have to say that, so many problems could be solved really quickly if people adopted a plant-based lifestyle. And I really think with huge conglomerate food operations, investing in plant-based products, seeing the writing on the wall that the whole world, we don't have enough worlds to produce the amount of meat that the world is wanting and going to want. So I really think the future is plants.
I mean, I predicted that answer, but also I get it. I love it. Well, Rachael, thank you again for being here. Just appreciate your time and expertise. Tell everybody how to connect with you, where to learn more, and you have an offer for everybody too.
I do. Yeah. My book, For Fork's Sake, can be purchased anywhere you like to buy books. You can find links to buy and a free guide to cooking and baking without oil on my website, which is www.forforksakebook.com. And also on there, I do have my Calendly link to sign up for consultations. And for your listeners, if you'd like a 30-minute free consultation to talk about transitioning to eating happy, I call it, away from the sad standard American diet to happy, healthy, and plant-powered yay. Yeah, sign up for a consultation and just mention Jenn. And you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at For Fork's Sake Book.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. All right, friends, are you ready for this week's nutrition nugget? So on Friday, we're talking about progress. Like, what do we do and what do we say to ourselves when the progress isn't what we wanted it to be? And I'm going to give you guys my mantra for these situations. So be sure to tune in on Friday for that one. Short and sweet, packed with good stuff. Well, as always, everybody, I'm your host, Jenn Trepeck. Connect with me on Instagram or really all social media. I am at Jenn Trepeck, JENNTREPECK. Website is asaladwithasideoffries.com. Whatever platform feels right to you, send a message. I want to hear your takeaways, your ideas, your questions. This is also the easiest way to learn more about working with me as your health coach. Rachel, thank you again for being here.
Thank you so much, Jenn. This was a great time.
It was. Friends, if you are not already a member, join our membership program by going to glow.fm/saladwithaside-of-fries. This supports this podcast and this community, but most importantly, it truly supports your health. You'll get this week's recipe for the vegetarian breakfast casserole. So until next week, and really always, I invite you to think about the big picture, right? The food systems, and then act on a micro level. Start with your own plate and your own home. Because when we all do this, we're locking arms to make a bigger shift in the industry and our planet. Well, friends, that's it for today's episode of Salad with a Side of Fries. Congratulations for making yourself and your health a priority. Thanks so much for joining us. Be sure to click subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast platform. Share us with a friend, and we'll be back next week. Always remember, you deserve it, and you are worth it. Happy healthy.